Welcome to my Midnight Horror channel. If you love listening to creepy Reddit stories or watching horror movies, you're in the right place. Find a cozy spot and get ready for today's spine-chilling tales. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated with our latest videos. Let's dive in story 1. The Haunting Hair. In a small, cozy apartment, a young woman named Diana was preparing dinner. She had just returned home after a long day at work and decided to treat herself with a freshly made hamburger. As she reached out to grab some extra condiments, she accidentally cut her finger with a small knife on the table. Blood started to drip from the wound, and something bizarre happened. Her long hair suddenly moved on its own, piercing the wound and sucking up the blood. Diana felt a wave of fear and confusion wash over her as she witnessed this strange occurrence. Still shaken, Diana sat down and continued her dinner. She accidentally let a strand of hair fall onto the plate, and within moments her hair absorbed all the sauce on the dish. This alarming incident made her even more frightened. Trying to calm herself, she cleaned up and prepared for bed, but the fear lingered in her mind. That night, as Diana tried to sleep, her thoughts kept returning to the bizarre incidents with her hair. She decided to distract herself with some television, but even the noise of the TV couldn't drown out her growing anxiety. Suddenly there was a knock at the door. It was the landlord, a gruff man in his 50s, who had come to collect the rent. "Evening, Diana," he said, his eyes roaming her small apartment. "I came to collect this month's rent." Diana nodded, reaching for her wallet, but the landlord's next words froze her in place. "You know," he said, his tone taking on a sleazy quality, "you could save yourself some money. Just one night with me and I could forget all about this month's rent." Diana felt a surge of disgust and anger, but before she could react, her hair seemed to take on a life of its own. It moved with a speed and purpose that terrified her, compelling her to grab a knife from the counter and stab the landlord in the shoulder. The scent of blood caused Diana to collapse to the ground, her pupils changing color as her hair took over, stabbing the wound and draining the blood from the landlord. When she regained consciousness, Diana found herself standing before a horrifying scene. The landlord lay motionless with her hair still embedded in his body. In a state of panic, Diana dragged the landlord's body and threw it down the stairs leading to the basement. The next morning, the police arrived to investigate, but the neighbors all clapped and cheered, saying the landlord deserved to die. No one suspected Diana. Only she knew the truth about the events caused by her bizarre hair. Recollecting her past, Diana remembered how she had wanted to dye her hair at home as a child. However, her sister, in a moment of carelessness, had mistakenly used an expired bottle of dye, which severely damaged Diana's scalp. To cover up the bald patch, Diana had worn a particular hairstyle ever since. As she grew older, she worked in a music company for over a decade without achieving fame. Even her boyfriend left her, calling her ugly and unsuccessful. One day, a kind colleague recommended a famous hair salon to Diana. Determined to change herself, Diana brought $500, which her parents had given her for rent, to the salon. After hearing her tragic story, the hairstylist suggested that she get a hair transplant. Diana chose a long, silky black wig at first sight, and the hairstylist praised her for her good taste, saying it was high-quality hair imported from India. The transplant process was bloody and painful. The stylist directly grafted the hair into Diana's scalp, causing her to cry out in agony. After being stitched up multiple times, Diana fainted. When she awoke and saw the results on her head, she thought everything was worth it. However, she didn't notice the stylist's eyes turning yellow behind her. Back at her company, Diana received admiring glances from everyone, boosting her confidence. That night, during her period, Diana tried to change her sanitary pad, but her hair suddenly extended and crawled into her pants, absorbing the menstrual blood. The next morning, her hair became exceptionally smooth and shiny. Her ex-boyfriend, noticing her newfound beauty, came back to see her. When he opened his eyes, he saw her eyes glowing, and her 40-meter-long hair had tied him up. The hair controlled Diana, making her smash a wine glass on him and drain his blood. It was then that Diana realized her cursed hair was taking over her consciousness. Diana researched and discovered from an old book that in India, a witch would sustain her life by drinking human blood. The hair the stylist transplanted onto Diana was not ordinary hair, but the remains from a genocide. Not wanting to be a blood-sucking tool for the witch, Diana decided to cut off her hair. However, when the stylist attempted to cut her hair, it began to thrash wildly and directly killed the stylist. The customers in the salon fled but were not spared. A woman washing her hair was also strangled by the long hair. Diana, with no place left to go, decided to hide at her company. Upon entering, she found a corpse and her manager sitting by the window. It turned out her manager had also visited the same salon. Both had become tools for the witch. The manager attacked Diana, and in the struggle, the manager's hair strangled and lifted her high, causing her to die instantly. Terrified, Diana ran away. She returned to work the next day and saw her manager, now a complete puppet controlled by magic. The manager attacked Diana, forcing her to hide in a room full of dead bodies. Diana grabbed an axe, ready to fight. Entering the office, she saw the manager hanging from the ceiling. They engaged in a fierce battle, hair flying in the air. Finally, Diana used the axe to attack and her high heels to smash the manager's head, ending the fight. Diana thought it was over, but the magical hair started to converge and chase after her. She ran to the recording studio, but the door couldn't hold back the powerful hair. In desperation, Diana found a gun under the table, but it turned out to be just a lighter. She remembered the stylist's warning to never wash her hair. Quick-witted, Diana used the lighter to activate the fire sprinkler system. The water made her hair convulse and fall out, reverting to her short natural hair. Although she no longer had her long, beautiful hair, she was finally free. From then on, Diana learned to love herself and accept who she truly was. She no longer sought to change her appearance at any cost and lived a peaceful and happy life. Let's come to the second story, Nightmare Nursing Home. One sunny afternoon, a grandmother decided to take her 2-year-old grandson to the roof of their building to watch the birds. She held him tightly, pointing out the different species and mimicking their calls, causing the child to giggle with delight. Her face was lit with a gentle smile, but that smile suddenly faded. Her eyes glazed over, and she placed the toddler on the ledge, dangerously close to the edge of the 100-meter-high building. Any slight movement could send him plummeting to his death. Meanwhile, the child's parents were oblivious to this terrifying scene. They were busy in the kitchen, preparing lunch and chatting about their day. It wasn't until the mother turned around and saw the empty high chair that panic set in. Their son was missing. They frantically searched the house, calling out his name, but there was no response. Desperate and terrified, they ran into the grandmother's room, hoping she had taken the boy for a nap. But the room was empty. Fear gripped their hearts as they imagined the worst. They dashed out into the hallway, shouting for their son and the grandmother, their voices echoing in the empty corridors. The grandmother had been suffering from severe dementia. When an episode struck, she would often wander off, sometimes forgetting the most crucial things, like where she had left her grandson. The couple searched the house frantically, but to no avail. The mother, now in tears, pleaded with her husband to find their child. Suddenly, they heard the grandmother's voice. She had wandered back into her room, looking confused. "Mom, where's the baby?" the father demanded, shaking her gently. The grandmother looked around, bewildered, unable to remember. The parents' hearts sank as they realized the gravity of the situation. Meanwhile, on the roof, the little boy was mesmerized by the birds flying overhead. He reached out to them, giggling and wobbling on the edge. The mother, driven by instinct, ran to the roof. She burst through the door just in time to grab her son before he tipped over the edge. Clutching him tightly, she sank to her knees, trembling with relief. The father arrived moments later, wrapping his arms around them both. They were safe, but the terror of what could have happened lingered. Back in the apartment, the grandmother sat quietly, her eyes filled with sorrow and confusion. She didn't understand what she had done, but could sense the tension in the air. The family decided that it was no longer safe for her to stay with them. Despite their love for her, they knew they had to protect their child. Reluctantly, they placed her in a nursing home, hoping she would receive the care and supervision she needed. The grandmother, however, didn't want to stay there. Back in the apartment, the grandmother sat quietly, her eyes filled with sorrow and confusion. She didn't understand what she had done but could sense the tension in the air. The family decided that it was no longer safe for her to stay with them. Despite their love for her, they knew they had to protect their child. Reluctantly, they placed her in a nursing home, hoping she would receive the care and supervision she needed. The grandmother, however, didn't want to stay there. She missed her family, especially her grandson, and pleaded with her son to take her home. She even knelt and begged for forgiveness, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. Her son, torn between guilt and anger, left her there, convinced it was the safest option for everyone. That night, the man had a disturbing dream. He saw his mother strapped to a bed, surrounded by shadowy figures. One of them, a bloodthirsty butcher, approached her with a gleaming axe. With a horrifying swing, he severed her arm. The man woke up in a cold sweat, his heart pounding. He knew he had to bring his mother home. He rushed to the nursing home, arriving in the dead of night. The place was eerily silent, the hallways dark and empty. He called out for his mother, but there was no answer. Panic set in as he searched every room, finding them all empty. It was as if the residents had vanished. Suddenly, he heard voices coming from a distant room. He followed the sound and stumbled upon a bizarre scene. The room was filled with lively, middle-aged people having a party. There was no sign of any elderly residents. The attendees looked at him with disdain, their eyes filled with hostility. A nurse approached him, smiling unnaturally. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm here to take my mother home," he replied, his voice trembling with urgency. "I made a mistake leaving her here. I want to care for her myself." The nurse's smile widened. "Everyone feels guilty at first," she said, her tone condescending. "But your mother is fine. She just needed some time to adjust. Why don't you come back in a week? She might not want to leave by then." Unconvinced, the man nodded and pretended to leave. Once outside, he circled back and sneaked into the building through a back door. He had to find his mother. As he crept through the dark hallways, he heard a door open nearby. He quickly hid in a closet, peeking through the slats. A man dressed in a black cloak entered the room, gazing into a mirror with an unsettling fascination. He caressed his face, almost lovingly, before donning his cloak and walking towards the closet. The man held his breath, terrified he would be discovered. But the cloaked figure simply opened a secret door behind the clothes and disappeared into the darkness. Heart pounding, the man waited until it was safe, then followed the hidden path. The tunnel was long and winding, lit by flickering torches. He eventually found himself in a cavernous room where an eerie ritual was taking place. Elderly people were being led to an altar, where shadowy figures performed strange ceremonies. The man spotted his mother, bound and struggling. He ran to her, but before he could reach her, he was grabbed by the cloaked figures. They dragged him to the altar, where he saw the horrifying truth. The nursing home was a front for a cult that harvested the life force of the elderly to rejuvenate themselves. The cloaked figures drained the vitality from the old, leaving behind only withered husks. Desperate to save his mother, the man broke free and fought off the cultists. He reached his mother and untied her, but she was weak and disoriented. As they tried to escape, the cult leader stepped forward, chanting in an ancient language. The man's mother, summoning her last bit of strength, confronted the leader. She refused to let anyone harm her son, and in a moment of maternal fury, she disrupted the ritual. The leader screamed in rage as the ritual backfired, causing the cavern to shake. The cultists were engulfed in flames, their stolen vitality turning against them. The man carried his mother through the collapsing tunnel, narrowly escaping the inferno. Outside, they collapsed, exhausted, but alive. The mother looked up at her son, her eyes filled with love and relief. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted to leave you." The man hugged her tightly, tears streaming down his face. "It's not your fault, Mom. We're safe now." They returned home, vowing never to speak of the horrors they had witnessed. The grandmother's dementia worsened, but the family was determined to care for her, ensuring she was never alone again. Years passed, and the memory of that night faded into a distant nightmare. The man often wondered if it had all been a dream, but the scars on his mother's wrist told him otherwise. They had survived the haunted asylum, and their bond was stronger than ever. Thank you for joining us on this eerie journey today. If you enjoyed the stories, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and share it with fellow horror enthusiasts. Your support helps us bring more terrifying tales to life. Remember to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss out on our next creepy adventure. Until next time, stay spooky and keep the lights on. You never know what's lurking in the shadows. Thanks you all.